History is often written by the victors, but tragedy belongs to the survivors. Red Dead Redemption 2 is not merely a Western. It is a sprawling, existential eulogy. It is a story about the relentless march of civilization and the violent, agonizing death of the wild. Set in 1899, the narrative commences amidst the unforgiving, blizzard-swept peaks of the Grizzlies. This harsh, white abyss serves as a stark metaphor for the Van der Linde gang. As current state, cold, desperate, and lost. They are fleeing a botched ferry heist in Blackwater, an event shrouded in mystery. That serves as the catalyst for their inevitable undoing. At the center of the storm stands Arthur Morgan. To the casual observer, Arthur is a brute, an enforcer, a relic of a violent age. But as we peel back the layers of his weathered exterior, we find a man wrestling with a profound internal dichotomy. The loyalty he owes to his father figure Dutch van der Linde, and the awakening conscience that whispers to him that their way of life is not just dying, it is already dead. This is not a story of victory. It is a story of a slow, heartbreaking decline. To understand the tragedy of Arthur Morgan, one must first understand the seduction of Dutch van der Linde in the early chapters, particularly at Horseshoe Overlook. The game presents us with the golden hour of the outlaw life. Dutch is not portrayed as a mere criminal warlord, but as a philosopher king. He preaches a gospel of freedom, railing against the industrialization and the crushing laws of a government that seeks to turn men into machines. For Arthur, an orphan taken in by Dutch and Hosea Matthews at a young age, the gang is not a criminal enterprise. It is a family. It is a sanctuary for the misfits and the broken. However, a shadow lingers over this pastoral dream. The script masterfully employs dramatic irony. We, the players, especially those who played the first game, know that this loyalty is misplaced. We watch with a sense of impending doom, as Dutch has promises of one last score and a utopia in Tahiti become increasingly manic and detached from reality. Arthur serves as the gang's anchor. He is the workhorse who funds the dream, yet he lacks the vision to see the cliff they are riding toward. He defines himself by his utility. "I'm just the muscle," he often claims. But beneath that self-deprecation lies a man seeking validation, desperate to believe that the violence he inflicts serves a higher, noble purpose. The narrative pivot occurs not in the wild, but in the encroaching jaws of civilization. St. Denis. The city is a labyrinth of smog, corruption, and modernity, an environment where the outlaw is an anachronism. It is here that the gang's hubris finally catches up to them. The disastrous St. Denis bank robbery is the narrative's turning point, the death of Hosea. Matthews is the death of wisdom. Hosea was the check to Dutch's balance, the reason to Dutch's passion. With Hosea gone, Dutch is left exposed to his own worst impulses and the toxic, nihilistic whispering of Micah Bell. Micah represents the outlaw stripped of the romantic code. He is chaos without purpose, violence without remorse. As Dutch's mental state deteriorates into paranoia, he begins to favor Micah's sycophancy over Arthur's honest skepticism. Then comes the diagnosis: tuberculosis. In a standard action narrative, the protagonist overcomes the obstacle. In Red Dead Redemption 2, the obstacle is mortality itself. The diagnosis strips Arthur of his physical dominance, the one thing he relied upon. It forces a change in perspective that is both terrifying and beautiful. Faced with the certainty of death, Arthur ceases to worry about the future of the gang and begins to worry about the state of his soul. This is where the title earns its weight. Redemption for Arthur Morgan is not about forgiveness from God or the law. It is about trying to do one right thing in a life comprised of wrongs. Arthur realizes that the age of the outlaw is a fantasy that has curdled into a nightmare. He sees that Dutch is willing to sacrifice everything, including the women and children of the camp, to feed his own ego. Arthur's loyalty shifts from the man, Dutch, to the people, John, Abigail, and Jack. The narrative arc becomes a race against time. Arthur becomes a tragic hero, using his fading strength to push John Marston toward a life he himself can never have. He becomes the bridge between the old world and the new. The dialogue in these final chapters is some of the most poignant in gaming history. When Arthur tells a nun, "I'm afraid," it shatters the archetype of the stoic cowboy. It reveals the terrified human beneath the hat. It is a moment of vulnerability that elevates the medium of video games to high art. He realizes that his life was wasted on a false prophet, but his death does not have to be wasted. The climax on the mountaintop is operatic. Betrayed by the father figure he worshipped, hunted by the law, and dying of disease, Arthur Morgan stands his ground. He does not fight to win, he fights to delay. Depending on the player's choices, their honor, the ending shifts in tone, but the outcome remains immutable. In the high honor ending, which stands as the thematic canon, Arthur passes away peacefully. He turns his face toward the rising sun. The stag, a spirit animal representing his inner nature, appears in his final vision. He dies alone, but he dies free. He wins the only victory available to him. He saved John. His last words, "I gave you all I had," are a devastating indictment of Dutch's failure and a testament to Arthur's sacrifice. The epilogue serves as a bridge, connecting the tragedy of 1899 to the events of 1911 and the original Red Dead Redemption. It shows us that Arthur's sacrifice bore fruit, however temporary. John Marston gets a few years of peace, a family, and a home paid for by Arthur's blood. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a masterpiece because it refuses to give us a happy ending. It respects its audience enough to break their hearts. It forces us to confront the passage of time, the failure of dreams, and the complexity of morality. Arthur Morgan began as a villain in someone else's story, but he died a hero in his own in the end. He was a bad man who tried to do good, and in the unforgiving landscape of the American West, perhaps that is the only redemption that matters. May we, amidst our own storms, stand unshaken. Thanks for watching.